In this video here, we're going to take a look at Gantt charts. Now we need to be able to construct and use Gantt charts. So a Gantt chart, which is also just sometimes called a cascade chart, provides us with a graphical way to represent the range of possible start and finish times for all activities on a single diagram. And the chart below shows an example of a Gantt chart. Now the number scale shows elapsed time, so the first hour is shown between 0 and 1. As you can see here, the second hour is shown between 1 and 2, as you can see here, and so on. You get the idea. Now the critical activities are presented as rectangles in a line at the top, so that's this line here. So as we can see then, for this project here, the critical activities are A, C, F, and H, okay? And that is the general convention here, that we present critical activities in a line at the top of our Gantt chart. And we can also clearly see from the Gantt chart that there is no flexibility in the timing of the critical activities. And the dotted lines, that's these lines here, right? As we can see on our Gantt chart here, they indicate the total float for the remaining activities. So activity B, D, E, and G, okay? So to finish with them, let's just work through a practice question together. So let's just get started then with this practice question here. Now what we're told here then is the diagram below represents an activity network for a project, right? And you should probably recognize this from one of our previous videos here when we had a look at the flow of an activity, right? It's the exact same activity network. Anyway, the number in brackets on each arc gives the time taken in days to complete the activity. Now for this question, then we've got two different parts to it. Part A is the exact same part of the question that we saw in the float of an activity video. So all we want to do here then is just find the float for each activity. And then in part B here, it just says hence or otherwise draw a Gantt chart for the project. So to draw a Gantt chart for the project, right, what we need to do then is find the float for each activity. And as you can see then, the question is structured in such a way that it will help us to answer this question, okay, or certainly part B of the question anyway. So let's start then with part A here. For part A then, I'll do it underneath here. So for part A, we'll do that underneath here. And then clearly, this here will be for part B, right? So for part B, I'll put that up there. Obviously, we're not doing part B just yet, but we'll come to that shortly. So for part A then, before we do anything else, let's just quickly make a point here to find the total float then for an activity. So total float is equal to, so it's the late event time, which I'll abbreviate to LET, minus the duration. So minus the duration, minus the early event time. And again, I'll abbreviate this here to EET. Okay? So what I'll do here is write down each individual activity. So I've got A, B, C. I've got D, E, and F. What else have we got here? We've got G and H. So G and H. Okay. Would probably look a little bit neater in a table here, but as you can see, I don't have tons of room. I'll just do it like this. It doesn't really matter too much how I kind of present the solution here, as long as we find the float for each individual activity. Okay. So for activity A then, my late event time is 4. My duration is 3. My early event time is 0. So 4 minus 3 is 1, minus 0. That just gives us a total float there of 1. Nice and easy. What about activity B then? So the late event time here is 5, minus the duration, which is also 5. So 5 minus 5 is 0, minus the early event time, which is also 0. So 0 minus 0 is clearly 0. So therefore, activity B here has a total float of 0. And what that means then is activity B here is a critical activity, right? Which is important, and we'll see that in a moment on the Gantt chart. What about activity C then? So the late event time here is 8, minus the duration, which is 4. So 8 minus 4 is 4, minus the early event time of 3. So 4 minus 3, and that gives us a total float there of 1. What about activity D here? So my late event time is 8, minus the duration, which is 2. So 8 minus 2 is 6, minus the early event time of 3. So 6 minus 3, and that gives us a total float there of 3. Moving on now, activity E here. So that's at the bottom. So my late event time is 8, minus the duration, which is 3. So 8 minus 3 is 5, minus the early event time of 5. So 5 minus 5, we get a total float of 0. So activity E is also critical, just like activity B. What about F here? So activity F then. So my late event time here is 14, minus the duration, which is 5. So 14 minus 5 is 9, minus the early event time of 7. So 9 minus 7, we get a total float there of 2. Okay. What about activity G here? So my late event time here is 14, minus the duration, which is 6. So 14 minus 6 gives me 8 there. And then 8 minus the early event time of 8, right? So in that case, then my total float here is 0. And again, activity G here is also a critical activity. And then finally, to finish with here for part A, activity H here. So that is 16 minus 2 minus 14. So 16 minus 2 is 14, minus 14, you get 0 as well. And again, activity H here is also a critical activity. So there we have it then. That gives us the solution here to part A, which will help us now to answer part B. So for part B then, as we can read here, it just says, hence or otherwise draw a Gantt chart for the project. So what I've got here then is my diagram to complete the Gantt chart. And they'll always give you this in an exam, so you don't need to worry about kind of constructing the diagram here to draw a Gantt chart. All we need to know here then is how do we actually draw the Gantt chart. So what I would do here is just start with the critical activities. So my critical activities here are B, E, G, and H, right? So the critical activities go in a line at the top of this diagram here, okay? I'm just considering here whether I do this in black or whether I change this to a different pen color. We'll just do it in black here. It shouldn't matter too much. So starting off then, activity B here. So we always go in the correct order here. And basically, you can kind of trace the path here. I'll do this in a different color just so you can see the critical path here. I'll do it in orange. So the critical path here is as follows. So we go through B, then we go through E, then we go through G here, and then finally we go through H, okay? And this path here is essentially what we're presenting then along the top row here, right? So going back to my original pen color then. So for activity B here, that has a duration of 5. So we start from 0 here, and we go to 5, which would be here. Like so. And there we have it. This here then is activity B. So when you draw the bar here, make sure you indicate the correct activity here. So that is activity B. Again, in an exam, please do use a ruler. Don't be lazy like me. Just use a ruler. It doesn't take too much time, right? So this here then is activity B. As we can see, that goes up to 5 days here on this diagram. Okay. So I'll give that a tick here, just to indicate that I've dealt with it on the Gantt chart. Activity E then, so it starts from 5 here, and it has a duration of 3. So it's going to go from 5 to 8 here. Like so. As you can see, it's pretty straightforward. So this here then is for activity E. And again, we'll take this off as we go. Next up then is activity G here. So activity G starts from 8 here, and it has a duration of 6. So it'll start at 8 and end at 14. So again, if I draw that on my diagram here, we'll get something like this. So this here then is activity G, like so. We'll give that a tick as well. And we're nearly done here then for the critical activities, right? So activity H now, again, is critical. So activity H then starts at 14 and ends at 16. It has a duration of 2, right? And we'll draw that here then on our diagram, like so. Okay, and that there is activity H. Perfect. Okay, so what we've dealt with there is the critical activities. Now, what about everything else then? So obviously, the remaining activities here are not critical, right? So for example, A has a float of 1, C also has a float of 1, D has a float of 3. So basically, if you have a float that isn't 0, then this activity here is not critical, right? Now, the way that we present these activities here on the Gantt chart is through separate rows, okay, as we go down. So to get us started then, we have activity A here. So activity A then has a duration of 3. It's going to start at 0. It has a duration of 3, and we have a flow of 1. So the way that we represent this here is we start at 0. We're going to go up to 3, the duration. So we go from 0 up to 3, which is here, like so. And what I also do here is I do a dashed line then, which isn't going to be perfect because my pen is quite thick, to indicate the extra flow here. Now, if you want to, you can also shade this here to indicate that it's flow, which I'm going to do here just because my dashed lines aren't the best. So this here then is flow. Okay, so this here is for activity A. Okay, it's a little bit easier to see for example, activity D and activity F, where the float's a little bit larger. You'll see that shortly. But anyway, let's just give it a tick as we go. What about activity C then? So again, we start on a new row here. So for activity C then, so we start at 3 here. So we always start with the early event time. So we start at 3. So we're going to start here, like so. My duration is 4. So I'm going to go from 3 to 7. We go from 3 to 7. I'm just trying to match it up perfectly here. My eyes aren't the best. So we'll go like that. Like so. This here then is activity C. But don't forget the total float here. Again, the float is only 1. So we go from 7 to 8 here. Okay. Something like this. And again, I'll just shade this here to indicate that it's float. Perfect. That's absolutely fine there. And we'll give that a tick as well. Good stuff. Now for the next activity here, activity D, well, we start from 3. So we start from 3 here, just as we did with activity C. So I'll jot that down like so. We have a duration of 2. So we go from 3 to 5, which is there. If my eyes don't deceive me. So activity D, we also have a total flow of 3, right? So we go from 5 to 8. So we use dashed lines here to indicate flow, like so. And I'll also shade it as well, again, just to indicate that this here is flow. Okay, so that gives us activity D there. Let's give that a tick as well. And we're nearly finished now, right? All that remains here is activity F. So again, we go down to the next line here. So activity F then starts from 7. So 7 is here. We start from 7, like so. We have a duration of 5. So we go from 7 to 12. So again, hopefully my eyes don't deceive me. Is this 12? Yeah, perfect. Like so. Perfect. So this here then is activity F. And what is the total float here? So for activity F then, we have a flow of 2. So we go from 12 to 14. Is that there? Yeah, perfect. It's much easier on paper, by the way, rather than trying to do this on a screen. And again, just to finish with here, we'll also shade this to indicate flow. And there we have it then. So this here is our Gantt chart to represent this project here in this activity network here. Okay. And there we have it then. So that gives the solution to the one practice question for this video here. And that brings us to the end then of this video here on Gantt charts.